At Chelsea, you're either a beast or you're nobody. That line isn't just football philosophy. It feels like a destiny carved for Diego Costa, the man who turned pitches into battlefields and chaos into the soil where he thrived. Diego da Silva Costa was born in 1988 in Lagarto, a small town in northeastern Brazil where life was harsher than it was glamorous. Football in those dusty streets was not about samba flair, it was about survival. Matches often ended with bruises and punches, but never without fire. Costa grew up breathing that air, and his temper was forged early. Once, when left on the bench, young Diego furiously hurled his shirt at the coach. Another time, he confronted a spectator face to face after feeling his team had been mocked. His father, a passionate football lover, named him Diego after Maradona, believing the ball was the family's only escape from poverty. For Costa, the ball was never just a toy. It was a lifeline, a promise. Day after day, he chased it barefoot on red dust streets, grinding cheap plastic balls into the ground, carrying in his chest the burning desire to one day step into the world's light. It was in those streets that Diego Costa's beastly identity was born. He learned that to survive, you could not be gentle. To win, you had to be tougher, stronger, nastier than the kid across from you. Every scuffle, every rough tackle etched in him the truth that football was not only art, but war. That street-bred instinct never left him, not even when he pulled on the shirts of Europe's greatest clubs. The story of Diego Costa doesn't begin with Brazilian smiles or dazzling tricks like Ronaldinho's. It begins with a scowling boy, eyes burning with defiance, standing before a future with only two paths: become the predator or be consumed. If childhood in Lagarto forged Diego Costa's toughness, then his early career tested him with something else: isolation and the harshness of professional football. At 17, Costa left Brazil for Portugal, signing with Braga. He was no wonder kid celebrated by headlines, just an unfamiliar teenager with raw technique, doubted by many for his ability to adapt. In those first European days, Costa often sat on the bench, loaned out to smaller clubs to get experience. But many youngsters would fade in such circumstances, but Costa was different. Every appearance to him was a fight for survival. When Atlético Madrid bought him in 2007, the pattern continued. Valladolid, Rayo Vallecano, Celta Vigo, Diego Costa's name still carried little weight, often overlooked by fans and pundits. Yet with every match, every foul, every yellow card, his chaotic weapon sharpened. Costa wasn't distinguished by South American flair, but by how he unsettled defenders, how he turned clashes into space and chances. The turning point came in the 2012-13 season. On loan at Rayo Vallecano, Costa unexpectedly erupted with 10 goals, showing he was more than a brawler, he was a scorer. When he returned to Atlético Madrid under Diego Simeone, everything clicked. Simeone, himself once a notorious villain on the pitch, recognized a reflection of his own spirit in Costa. He harnessed that aggression, shaping Costa into a devastating weapon up front. Then came the 2013-14 season. Costa transformed completely, scoring 36 goals in 51 matches, powering Atlético Madrid to their first La Liga title in 18 years and all the way to the Champions League final. Though a hamstring injury crippled him in Lisbon, the message was clear. Diego Costa had arrived. Europe now knew him as a striker unlike any other, part ruthless finisher, part agent of chaos. This was the moment the world realized Diego Costa was never meant to be a football artist. He was a warrior. He came from street football, and now that street-born instinct had stepped fully under the lights of the Champions League. After years of drifting across Braga, Valladolid, Rayo Vallecano, and Celta Vigo, where he was often regarded as nothing more than a loanee or a backup option, Diego Costa finally found his stage in the 2013-14 season. Under Diego Simeone's command, he erupted into one of the most feared strikers in the world. Costa scored an astonishing 36 goals in 51 appearances, a tally that carried Atlético Madrid to their first La Liga title in 18 years, breaking the duopoly of Real Madrid and Barcelona. Unlike the South American forwards admired for flair and artistry, Costa's style was brutally direct. Every run was violent, every duel was war, every finish was fueled by an instinct to destroy. The highlight of that season came in the Champions League semi-final when Costa scored against Chelsea, the club he would soon join, to send Atletico into their first European Cup final in almost half a century. Fate, however, was cruel. In the Lisbon final against Real Madrid, Costa lasted only a few minutes before hobbling off with a hamstring injury. From the bench, he watched helplessly as Atletico collapsed in stoppage time. Despite the heartbreak, Europe had already taken notice. This was no ordinary striker, but a beast unleashed. In the summer of 2014, Chelsea moved decisively, paying $32 million to bring Costa to Stamford Bridge. Jose Mourinho had long searched for a forward with the brutality and ruthlessness to lead his attack, and now he had found him. Costa wasted no time. In his first 4 Premier League games, he scored 7 goals, including a ruthless hat-trick against Swansea. Mourinho, a man rarely given to hyperbole, simply said, "He's a monster." The 2014-15 season confirmed Costa's reputation. He finished with 20 league goals and drove Chelsea to the title. But more than goals, what defined Costa was chaos. He taunted, he stamped, he elbowed, he provoked. He turned matches into psychological wars and defenders into trembling wrecks. Media branded him the Premier League's #1 villain, while Arsène Wenger bitterly admitted, he knows how to turn football into psychological warfare. Under Antonio Conte, Costa reached another peak. As Chelsea shifted into the 3-4-3 system in 2016-17, he thrived as the lone spearhead, scoring 14 goals in his first 18 league games. His equalizer against Manchester City at the Etihad sparked a dramatic 3-1 comeback that symbolized Chelsea's grit and supremacy. It was more than a goal. It was a statement. By the end of the season, Chelsea were champions again, and Costa had cemented his reputation as the league's most ferocious predator. In total, across 3 seasons with Chelsea, Costa scored 59 goals in 120 appearances, winning 2 Premier League titles and a League Cup. The numbers may not rival Messi or Ronaldo, but they carried weight. His goals often came when Chelsea needed them most, tilting battles and igniting triumphs. He was never elegant, never graceful, but he was decisive. He was a winner. Costa's legacy at his peak was never just about statistics. It was about identity. At Stamford Bridge, he became the embodiment of chaos, the heir to Didier Drogba's warrior mantle, less poetic, more savage. To Chelsea fans, he was a hero. To rivals, a nightmare. To football, he was proof that greatness need not come from beauty. It could also come from fury, relentlessness, and war. At his brightest, Diego Costa redefined what it meant to be a striker. He was executioner and agitator, scorer and villain, predator and warrior rolled into one. He turned football into battlefields, and in doing so, he etched his name into the game's history forever as the beast who thrived on chaos. Diego Costa never saw himself as a football artist. He didn't have Ronaldinho's magical dribbling or Ronaldo Nazario's natural goal-scoring grace. But his philosophy was crystal clear. Football is war, and only those who are stubborn, ruthless, willing to provoke, and ready to do whatever it takes deserve to survive. To many, he was a villain, a bad boy of the pitch. But to Costa, it was merely survival. He once said, "If I smile at defenders, they'll smile back. But if I make them angry, I'll gain the advantage." That street-born mentality followed Costa from the dusty roads of Lagarto to the grandest stages of Europe. He understood a truth others often ignored. Aggression itself can be a weapon. When defenders began to lose their temper, when they shouted, pushed, or overreacted, that was when space appeared, when goals could be scored. Costa turned games from art shows into psychological battles, and he was a master at transforming chaos into opportunity. The soul of Costa's football lay in fearlessness. He never feared contact, never feared being hated, never feared becoming the subject of endless controversy. He could be suspended, vilified by the press, and jeered by stadiums, but every time he returned, He threw himself into duels as if it were the last match of his life. He knew he wasn't perfect, but he was fiercely loyal to that identity. For Costa, the only thing that mattered was victory, and he was willing to sacrifice personal image to achieve it. What set Costa apart was that he didn't just fight for himself. At Chelsea, at Atletico, teammates often recalled how he was the first to rush in when someone was fouled, the one who stood up against opponents, the one who turned fury into fire for the whole team. He was the one who created battles, yes, but also the one who protected his own. That was his philosophy. Football wasn't just about goals or beauty, it was about standing your ground. It may have been a simple creed, born in the streets and sharpened on European fields, but in the brutal world of elite football, Costa's raw instinct made him unique. He was the beast who embraced chaos, and in doing so, he carved out a soul of football that was unforgettable. After his glorious seasons with Chelsea, Diego Costa's star began to fade, dimmed by conflict, injuries, and his reckless lifestyle. The same wild nature that once made him one of the most feared strikers in the world also became the double-edged sword that dragged him down. Costa was never the type to conform, and when tensions arose, he was more likely to confront than compromise. The 2015 and 16 season opened with chaos. Chelsea collapsed under Mourinho, and Costa became the focal point of criticism. He scored only a handful of goals in the first half of the campaign, looked overweight, and had clearly lost his sharpness. The English press tore into him, rivals mocked him, and for the first time, Chelsea fans began to question his commitment. The image of Costa throwing his training bib toward Mourinho during a Champions League match became symbolic of the fractured relationship between player and manager. When Mourinho was eventually sacked, Costa was named among the rebels in the dressing room, accused of undermining the coach. But the storm was far from over. Though Conte managed to revive Costa in the 2016-17 season, instability followed him like a shadow. Transfer rumors to China circulated constantly, while Conte demanded strict discipline. Then came the infamous text message from Conte to Costa, "You're not in my plans." It was the final crack in their relationship. Costa reacted with fury, refusing to return to training and even celebrating publicly in an Atletico Madrid shirt while still under contract with Chelsea. By the time the new season began, he was already an outsider within his own team. His return to Atletico Madrid was meant to be a redemption arc, a chance to close the circle. But Costa was no longer the same. His physicality had declined, his body betrayed him with recurring injuries, and his duels lacked the terror they once inspired. He still fought with the same fire, still argued with referees, still provoked defenders, but the effectiveness was gone. Goals became rare, suspensions more frequent, and Costa slowly became a shadow of himself. The tragedy of Diego Costa is that he was too loyal to his own nature. He refused to adapt, unwilling to soften in a football world increasingly dominated by tactical systems, polished images, and controlled behavior. Costa clung to his street-born instincts, but football no longer had room for a pure villain. From a beast that once spread fear, he became proof of football's cruelty. One day you are a hero, the next you are forgotten. For Costa, decline came not only through fading legs, but through a personality that never changed, even when the game around him had. Diego Costa was never the type of player to be universally admired. He wasn't graceful, he wasn't artistic, and he didn't leave behind countless highlight reels of dazzling tricks. Yet, his legacy endures because it was carved in raw passion, wild instinct, and the uncompromising spirit of a warrior. Every time he stepped onto the pitch, he carried chaos with him, and somehow, that chaos became a weapon that delivered victories. At Chelsea, he is remembered as the fiery striker who ignited Mourinho's and Conte's teams, driving the Blues to 2 Premier League titles in just 3 years. His goals often arrived in crucial moments, but more than numbers, it was his sheer presence that terrified defenders. Opponents hated him, the media vilified him, yet Stamford Bridge adored him as a man who would bleed for the badge. At Atletico Madrid, he embodied Simeone's relentless philosophy, powering them to La Liga glory and a Champions League final. Costa's legacy isn't measured by goals alone, but by emotions. Fans may forget the statistics, but they will never forget the sight of Costa standing tall, provoking, fighting, sometimes even earning red cards simply to protect his teammates. He played the game with raw honesty, and that truth made him unforgettable. He was never pretending to be anything else. What you saw was what you got. Today, when people talk about Diego Costa, opinions are divided. Some love him, some loathe him, but no one is indifferent. And that, in itself, is the essence of legacy, to leave behind a mark that cannot be erased. Costa proved that football is not just about brilliance and artistry, it is also about grit, fire, and the villains who somehow win our hearts through their unapologetic authenticity. If you believe Diego Costa's story deserves to be remembered, hit the like button, share this video, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so we can continue celebrating football's most unforgettable legends together.